I'd like to start with an introduction to this episode. It's slightly longer than usual because we had a beautiful and deep coaching conversation, myself with Robbie Swale, which you'll hear very soon. And you'll hear about a bit about him as well. And what I wanted to point out here is that we started off with a conversation of what's next, what do I want to do, and what's coming up. And the conversation could have gone in two ways. One is let's set some goals, let's create a plan and a structure on how to achieve it, and really, have a solid kind of plan, implementation plan for next year, or at least some goal clarity around goals. Or it could have gone the second way, which it did, and that is to really explore what's going on internally for Robbie as this question of what's next came up. Robbie's a person who knows how to get things done. If he wants to get things done, he does it. He had a year full of action, lots of things on the go, lots of achievements. And now he was coming to this, okay, so what am I going to focus on next? And I know that whatever he chooses to focus on, he will do and he will implement because that's who he is. So for me, what was bubbling up in this conversation was, what is this question about? What's going on inside of Robbie and his thinking and feeling and needs that was bringing up this question, and how can we help him actually come to a place where he can figure those things out in a way that's going to be exciting for him for what's next, and really something he wants to dive into and apply the same approach and methodology and structure that he usually does. So rather using his old structures and old ways for a new way of being, let's figure out what is this new way of being that he's looking for, and then the structures and methodologies will support that. So I hand over to you. It's a really interesting conversation, went in a few unexpected directions, but with a beautiful, beautiful result in the end. Enjoy. I am so excited to have a Leadership Live podcast episode that is something that we haven't done for a while. Today, we are going to be having a coaching conversation with the very super awesome Robbie Swale. He's a friend and a colleague, and I just love every conversation that we have, Robbie. So let me do a bit of an introduction to welcome you, and just welcome, first of all. Robbie Swale is a leadership coach, author, and podcaster whose work focuses on creativity, leading with honor, and the craft of coaching. He's the host of two podcasts, the Coach's Journey podcast and the 12-Minute Method podcast, and the author of the 12-Minute Method series of books, including How to Start When You're Stuck and How to Keep Going When You Want to Give Up. And I know there are 4 in the series so far and more to come. So I'm really excited to have you here. Welcome, Robbie.
Thanks, Daphne. It's great to be here.
Yeah. And since we are doing this wonderful thing of a coaching conversation, I want to say something to you just to set the scene a little bit. I want us to pretend that it's just the two of us. I know that there are other people that are going to be listening in and gaining from this experience, but the most important thing is that you should gain a good coaching conversation from it. So I know it's tough, both of us actually, to just kind of focus ourselves, be present, and just dive into the coaching. So I'd love to ask, what's on your mind today, Robbie?
Yeah, I'm noticing what you're saying now. I was just noticing, feeling nervous.
Okay, hold on. Maybe let's give that some space. Okay, a little bit of nerve. I mean, I think for me as well, it's quite a thing to coach live. Yeah. I don't want to feel like I'm, putting on a performance or a show. So let's take a few breaths to just maybe connect with ourselves and just get centered and present.
Yeah, that's nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and as we were doing that, the sun's just come out here in the west of England. We've just moved house. I can see a horse. They keep horses in the field next to us, so it's really.
Oh, wow!
It feels like the universe has just sent me like shafts of sunlight to help with that. So
what a beautiful scene. I can imagine it. Just beautiful. Nature, sunshine.
It's really nice.
In England.
Exactly. I know there. And since we've moved as well, like the rain has been sheeting down in England style. Yeah, and maybe like that is a part of what's on my mind. So a part of what's on my mind is I'm just really getting a sense of it actually than I have before. the last couple of years in some ways have felt like the endings of some cycles for me. So when I got to about 5 years in my business, I realized I'd kind of achieved the things I set out to achieve, which is an amazing thing to be able to say.
Amazing.
Which was like, I've created a business working with the kinds of people I wouldn't have thought was possible 5 years earlier. And it supports me enough in the ways financially and in those kind of ways too. And then I'm coming to the end of another cycle this year in my work, because the 12-minute method books you're talking about, the fourth one will come out just before Christmas. They've been a project in mind for like, the idea of the project is probably 3.5 years old. And the writing's been mostly done for about 3 years. So that'll be another kind of ending of a cycle. And then this house move is one, because there's a way in which the thing that has been missing for us as a family has been, we've known for a while that the place we were living in London wasn't the right place it wasn't where we were going to be. And so there's been a cycle or a period of getting to this place. And we moved in as we're speaking, like we actually moved like less than a week ago. We finished buying a place like a month ago, but then there's been some transition while our daughter was still at nursery in London, and we were kind of living and working there and getting some stuff up and running and sorted here, and buying a fridge and things.
Yes, those things need to get done too.
They do, and they're not all done yet by any means. But there is a sense of like, I guess looking out here now of the window, the tree in the garden and the horses in the field, it's like there is a sense of this bit settling.
And also, Robbie, I'm going to bring something in, is the birth of your daughter, which I know that is something that was much anticipated and a big milestone in your life.
Absolutely, a huge milestone. It didn't necessarily come easily for us. I can't remember if we've talked about that before, but and as for many people, it doesn't. And absolutely, and she's now, maybe it was when we last spoke on my podcast, she was just born or just about to be born.
Just about to be born.
Like probably like weeks before, weeks later when we recorded it, actually, because she came a month early. She'll be 2 in about a month's time.
Wow.
So it's like a totally different creature now to obviously. Well, not obviously, but I didn't know that, right? Because I don't really, I didn't really know that, but it's like every day she speaks more, it's more her. She's got sentences now, basically, albeit in her kind of 2-year-old talk. So yeah, there is absolutely that in all this as well. So that's all on my mind. But what kind of came to me, what's coming up for me at the moment, though, of course, is we're also at the end of a cycle about this year. So I tend to think about my work in the calendar year cycle, January to December.
Okay.
I've just ended up getting into that habit of setting goals, thinking about what I want to achieve for a year. And so we're coming to the end of that one now. Like I said, the 4th book will be coming out. We're working on this ridiculous podcast challenge, which this is partly about. Which is, one way or another, is coming to an end. Whether I'll get to my 100 or not, that I'll find that out in the next 6 weeks, 2 months. And so I've noticed for the past 6 weeks, as I've kind of got a hold on what I'm going to be doing for the rest of this year, like I've been thinking quite a lot about, well, what happens next year? So in some ways that is on my mind, but it's not just that. And maybe this is where some of the problems comes from for me, because I do like options often overwhelm me. But it feels to me like it's tied into something. It's not just what am I going to do next year? It's what's the next, it's in a way, it's what's the next phase of work for me. What do I want to do?
So you described it as a cycle where things are kind of achieved. You've been able to say, I've done this, all the things you've wanted are here. And you feel a transition in that end of year, end of December timing that is leading into something.
Yeah.
And
it's like, maybe the books are quite important in it, I think, because with my yearly goal setting for the last few years, they've been on it. And so every time they haven't been done, it's like, which, I've thought about quite a lot why they didn't, but, every time they haven't been completed, I've known what was going on next year's list.
Because they weren't. That's really fascinating. And that's a fascinating mindset of almost leave something undone so that you have something to put on your list next year.
Oh, I hadn't thought about it like that, but it's like, it may be. Yeah, right.
Oh.
And
I wonder how many of us do that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because what happens, it's almost like there's this void, right? You've done so much. You've done so much and you've achieved so much. And it's kind of like a now what? Is it a now what? Yeah,
well, it is a bit. And then what I wonder in that is when you were saying that, it's like, so I often think about, I had some amazing stories with clients of this. I had a client once who was avoiding writing she wanted to create an ebook to like build her events business. She was avoiding writing the ebook once so much that she started this other little side hustle, a really cool side hustle that she'd been thinking about for years.
Do something that's much harder work in order to procrastinate on the thing that will really move you forward.
Exactly. And I'm not sure that I'm doing it so actively as that, but like a couple of years, like about a year ago, maybe I had this idea in my work that, there are kind of three themes. You named them, right? I send them out as part of my introduction now, right? The three themes are leadership, creativity, and coaching.
Okay.
I've done quite a lot of work on coaching. That's what my first podcast was about. I do work to support coaches. That's a part of my work now. And the 12-Minute Method books and this year has been about creativity. Mm. So in some ways, I do know in theory what is next, which is the leadership piece. It's like, I had a thought a couple of years ago.
I actually want to stop you there for a moment because you're very much in thinking brain. So I had a thought and this is very, rational. I have three themes that I've been focusing on and now leadership gets its chance. And I'm wondering, what do you want? What does your heart say? And maybe just actually, let's even stop everything and just explore, where are you right now? What do you feel?
On a kind of physical level, I'm noticing a bit of tension in my throat. And maybe a little bit of kind of tension in my chest as well.
You want to just breathe into that tension. What is it saying to you?
Well, I think the throat sensation feels like it's saying, it feels like the holding back the voice is what comes up. Mm. And, one of the questions I had is before this call, I was like, do I want to be an authority on leadership? Mm. And because I have basically, I have become an authority on creativity in my small corner of the world. I kind of can see that that's happened. Yeah. I don't feel like it doesn't feel very satisfying. It doesn't feel quite right. It doesn't feel like satisfying to say that somehow. So I'm not sure I've quite got it.
What's coming up for me as I listen to you is that you've achieved amazing things by using the strategy, I think. So tell me if I'm wrong, for sure. You're always welcome to do that. But by using the strategy of putting three buckets in place that you want to focus and place attention on. And that's worked for you in terms of the coaching bucket and the creativity bucket. You've really done a lot. The leadership bucket you feel might need some attention now. And what's interesting for me is, are they really that different?
Yeah, no. I mean, no, they're not really. Yeah, it's a great point. Yeah.
So what's going on for you that you've set up the structure? Or how does the structure serve you, actually?
Yeah. So the structures definitely serve me, but it's quite a strategic, well, I don't know. Feels like it's quite a strategic way. So it felt like, I remember when it kind of came, it felt like it was neat or like trying to hold the complexity of what I enjoy in my work as a human and as a person. It was neat because it holds pretty much everything that I really like about my work is in there. Like I love doing work with coaches, and I'm thinking at the moment about whether that might change how I do that, but I do love that and the craft of coaching. This creativity stuff is fascinating to me. It's been it's been a real pleasure to have lots more conversations about that this year as the book come out. And in there, the procrastination, those things. And then the leadership piece, I guess it's like, that's where I feel like my actual coaching, I spend most of my time in my actual coaching, doing work on leadership in different ways. And it's neat as well because it's a neat way to talk about it, because it means that people can like almost anyone I talk to will be interested in one of those things. And so I get to have a lot of interesting conversations. But yeah, they're not. I mean, I don't have on some levels, I don't have a worry that if I talked about, if I kept talking only about creativity in all my work, that wouldn't preclude me from, running workshops or coaching people in anywhere, right? Yeah. People are interested in that. I mean, maybe it's interesting because I can't remember what you said in the intro or what I sent in my bio. I had this thought a while ago. So I'm wondering about the leadership piece then, like what's there? If there's something there, what is it? And I had this thought a while ago that like one of the things that in some ways my success in my work has been about gradually bringing and allowing more of myself into it. Okay. So each stage there's been like, oh, there's this bit of me that I haven't really, integrated. And one of the things I absolutely love, and I think I wrote it even in one of the questions you sent me ahead of this call, I love reading fantasy novels. I made this website about my favorite novelist. It was one of the first things that I did that I'd procrastinated on for a long time, and then I did it. I'm just really proud of that. And there's this small corner of not all British, like mostly British readers of this particular author who love this little thing that I made about.
Amazing. Yeah.
It's pretty niche, but I love it. But I had this thought, like, why doesn't that, for a while, I didn't tell anyone about that in my work, right? I kept it, it was like a little sort of guilty secret or something. I thought that, a leadership coach or whatever isn't supposed to be a fantasy geek. And then I was like, stuff that, right? But it's not really in my work. So it's something that I'm really interested in. It isn't really in my work. And so the thought I had a while ago is maybe the kind of stories of honor, which is mostly what, particularly that fantasy novelist, but a lot of fantasy is about right and wrong and honor and loyalty and those kind of values. I was like, maybe that's the leadership piece.
Yeah. Wow.
And I'm also aware, and I don't know if you have a thought on this, Daphne, from seeing it with other people. Like, I don't get, because we connected through Rich Litvin's community, which is a lot about setting outrageous goals. And I really feel like the thing that I learned from Rich and from working with him was a real belief for myself that anything is basically possible. And I think, and that's a crazy outcome to get from working with somebody.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's from that or, but I remember for a big phase of this business that I've done, there were lots of things in it that scared me and that like felt edgy. And I'm not sure, that felt scary. And I don't really get that anymore. And I don't know if I've just gone past that point. I'm not sure if I've just gone past that point, where there are things like that, or if I'm not being honest with myself about what's scary, or if there are things that I'm avoiding because they're so scary.
Yeah. That's all valid. It's kind of what I often talk about, which is what got you here won't get you there. So there's a cycle of doing, and actually I do see this a lot with people that I work with. There's a cycle of doing that you are so in the mindset of getting things done and having achievements behind your name and things that are really important to building your reputation and your business and your passion and your experience and your skill. And you're so in that focused mode of doing to get there. And you get there and you get to that level and you've achieved what you wanted. And somehow that next level becomes a little bit elusive. What is the next level going to be about? Yes, you can carry on doing what you're doing. You've done incredible things, podcasts, books, coaching, supporting coaches, bringing in your creativity and that website with your fantasy books. I think that's amazing, all amazing stuff while being a dad, moving house, finding the right place for you. All of that is a lot of stuff to get done. And now you're in the phase of, okay, so everything that I've done to get me to this point has happened. Those are not the things that you're going to continue to do to get you to the next level. You can continue doing those things and you'll be great. There's nothing wrong with this picture. But there's something calling at you. And I think maybe that's probably also because of our, love of adrenaline and excitement and challenge that keeps pushing us forward and saying, well, okay, what's next? What's going to be the next challenge? I know I found myself in that spot and have asked myself the same questions. And it's a different level of mindset, of thinking, of being that is going to take you there to that next level. It's not doing more of the same.
Mm. I guess I'm asking in my mind now, it's like, is even the way of, like, because in some ways I'm asking, in some ways you've been pointing at that in this conversation, or we've been pointing at it, it's like the letting of the things, like the tail wagging the dog was the metaphor you used. Like, it's like that thing, we're kind of pointing at it. And I guess I'm just wondering, like, what's a way of looking at the future that will really serve me now? It might be, like, I don't know for sure that it's not just going back and doing some of the things that I've done before.
For sure. And I think you'll continue doing some of it. I'm not saying you stop everything.
Yeah, but even like the ways that I have, yeah, exactly. Like even the ways that I think about the future, but what's actually a way, I guess the question that's coming up for me now is, how can I look at the future in a way that supports me, like now? And I don't think I have an answer to that.
What is the support that you need now? What do you need now?
Well, what comes up, but I don't know if this is like, I don't know if this is...
You're an overthinker, hey? You have a thought and you're immediately like giving the answer. So what came up?
Well, I think I've forgotten now, so it's absolutely classic. I think what came up was...
Forget about what you think what came up. If I ask you now, what do you need now? And we even touched on maybe if it's in the direction of what is the support you need now?
Yeah.
Forgetting about the future. Imagine the future's sorted. It will be amazing.
Well, what's coming up now is kind of, what do I want? But a bit more than that, it's like, what's the impact that I want to have? Because what is the
impact that you have? I don't know. I suppose this is where my intuition is leading me, but it feels like there's a lot of overdrive and activity about what's next, which is good. And I'm not knocking that. And I really do want to say that for overachievers and high achievers, that's where we're at. A lot of the time is like, what's next? What's next? What's the next challenge? What's the next thing? I'm a little bit bored. I'm a little bit this. I've done this. What, not enough to do one book. Let's do 4 books in a year. I want to do 100 podcasts this year. And those are great things. I'm not knocking it at all. And it is a way of thinking and a way of behavior that gets us to achieve these amazing things. Okay. But if we put that aside for just a few minutes and just be present with what's happening for us in the moment and kind of, what do you need now? Given all of these things, and given that your future is bright, your future is bright. It's happening. It's going a certain way, and you achieve even more of everything that you want. So let that thought rest a little bit. What's the smile about?
Just that when you said that before, that was I guess, because I do coaching, it was in some ways the smile is about the move that happened there, which was like the limiting assumption. So I like Nancy Klein's work. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah.
It's this great incisive question. You essentially did that move on me. I don't know if you were thinking about that or anything like that, but it's like there was a limiting assumption, which I saw it and it was fine, which is I need to know something in order for the future to be good. And you were like, well, imagine the future's sorted.
Good.
And suddenly, instead of my mind being like full and tight, it was like pretty empty with, okay. Which is, I think the smile was like, that's done something, hasn't it? So yeah. I
love it. Robbie, can I give you some feedback in the moment? Because you analyze everything. You even analyze your feelings. You even analyze this beautiful moment that happened for you where everything was kind of released.
Yeah.
And you're analyzing it. Why don't you just be in it for a few moments? Just be in that. All the worrying, because I'm hearing,
definitely. Like the reason, I think part of the reason the analysis is useful is because it's like a really important insight. Because essentially,
yes,
what do I need? Well, I don't need anything.
Huh.
And I mean, that's weird.
Not weird at all.
But there is a way in which that's true, and that.
I just would maybe encourage you to spend a moment in the insight before you go and analyze it. Spend a moment in that feeling of, wow, I don't need anything. Can I share a story? I actually feel like I want to share the story that is a personal story of mine that actually just brings back that feeling. And it's that I went to the Osho retreat in India I had a week planned there. And I went with a group of friends, but we each did our own thing over there. And we were doing these meditations. I'm really not good at meditation, something I'm practicing in my life and want to get better at. But I thought a week of intense meditation would really, really get me going and do me some good. So I was doing it and really enjoying some more than others and whatever. But at one moment in one of the meditations, or day 5, I had this moment of awakening that I can't even describe to you. I was in the meditation hall with everybody meditating and doing their thing. And all of a sudden, my eyes just opened and I had this awareness. I can't even explain it, with this knowledge, knowing that everything I needed was at home. And it was like, you've done what you needed to do, go home. It was this knowing. And in that moment, I felt so calm and so like just this flash of insight that I knew that I just needed to go back home. And I did. I changed my flight, went back home, and it was wonderful. But having that insight was an incredible experience, and just being able to be with it for a little bit. And I checked with my friends and I was like, is this fear? Do I not want to be here anymore? Have I hit up against resistance? The truth is, I really don't think that I did. It was a moment of such clarity that was so powerful that I knew exactly where I needed to be and what I needed to do. And I feel like there was a little bit of that in your experience of, I don't need anything. And what does that feel like for you when you think or feel that? or know that, have that moment of clarity or insight of, I don't need anything.
So it's like, it's hard because it's hard to stay in it.
Yeah.
Because it's, like, my mind is going straight away to, yeah, but what am I actually going to do?
Okay, fear.
Or like,
fear.
yeah. Or, it's not.
It's not the high achiever mode that we have been trained in.
Yeah, and I like ideas went through my mind about, well, what does this mean? I was already in that.
Exactly.
Like, so what does it mean for, what my work will look like? Or how does it affect the thinking? Because again, your questions prompted me to think about money again. I wonder about is like, a great insight for me a few years ago was I have enough money. I don't have to stress about growing my business any further because actually it's perfect.
Wow.
And I have less money.
And that's a scary place. I just want to say that is a scary place when it's exactly that point. It's that point of transition where you've done what you set out to do. You have what you need. And our overdrive, motivation, mentality, adrenaline-based, whatever, is saying to us, you have to do more. You have to decide. You have to be clear. You have to have a goal.
Yeah, it's like the thought that I had then was, I have what I need, and so therefore, what do I want? Right? Which is it, but not in a kind of. I feel like for some people saying that, maybe for me saying it at a different time, it would be a really useful thing to do. Because it's like, okay, yeah, great. Like, but I'm not even really acknowledging what I need, right?
It's like kind of another way of moving on to the next thing.
Exactly.
Because if you go to the depth of that question of what do I really want, and I sit with it and think about it and say, is that what I really want? Why do I want it? That's a different energy of that question than, okay, so what do I want? Okay, let's set the next goal and go for it.
Yeah.
It is much more of an unknown place to just be in.
Yeah, and I guess I'm really aware in this moment of the benefits for me of some of the structures that I have created for me being able to make meaningful work. And I guess in this moment, I'm wondering, how do I hold those structures and that insight in a way that I can, I don't know, absorb the insight without losing the...
Yeah. I love what you're saying, Robbie, because for me, that speaks of integration.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's holding the structures because they're good and they're useful, and allowing room for I have what I need. What comes up for you when you think about that?
I just don't really know what it means. You know what I mean? I noticed, like, I want to know what it means for me. I want to know what it means for all the things I've been thinking about, basically. So what does all those things? What does it mean for money? What does it mean for, I think a lot about I need, but this might be an important one. Yeah. I think a lot about, like, I have what I need. But one of the things that catches me sometimes is, for example, for my wife, like part of her, like, our decisions are interlinked, in our marriage, at least, part of the reason I have enough money is because she has some money. And part of the, which is a lot of the reason that we have this house, because she's been amazingly successful in her work. But I guess I have what I need I don't know how that interlinks with her. And there's a way in which I could probably just have that conversation now that I have this insight. Because some of the things, I guess in some ways I'm aware that some of the things I think about are like predicting an answer for her for that question, which I think is like I know her really well. We talk a lot. I'm a perceptive human, so I'm probably right, but I might not be.
Yeah,
and it is somewhat guesswork.
So if I may, it's a lot of what you do, Robbie. I see even from just our conversation is a lot of kind of posing questions, giving the answer, posing, and going on this route of almost like what you already know. It's similar thought patterns.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, how do you bring in other thought patterns, something different? How do you make room for a different way of being in this?
Yeah, I don't think I know. I kind of like ideas are coming to me, but I don't know, like I genuinely.
What ideas are coming to you?
I mean, a lot of the things that I think, I guess let me see if I can get this. I'm seeing that a lot of the things that, what would you say, like people do, I'll tell you what they are in a minute, may be about actually. One of the things they do is they create space for new ways of thinking. Okay. So coaching would be one of them. But potentially there are other practices. You mentioned meditation. I too am a poor quality meditator.
Yeah, it's that kind of high achiever mindset.
Because of, yeah, exactly. But partly because I'm not a member of a gym here. I did some yoga yesterday, and it's like there's a way in which that finding that, these things. And then there are other things that I have done. I've taken myself on, not many times, but a couple of times in the last few years, I've taken myself on retreats of my own design. So it's like, these are things that come to mind as ways to make space for new ways of thinking.
New ways of thinking and new ways of being.
Yeah. Yeah, both of those things.
Yeah.
It's not that I haven't been doing any of those things, but I think this year particularly has been a really action-focused year.
Yeah.
It feels like a year that has been like, and in a way that's been necessary.
Yes. 4 books, 2 podcasts, 100 podcast guesting, coaching, fathering.
Exactly. But it's like I had to do that to these things that weren't done. That I felt really strongly to be done. The books particularly, it felt like it required a year of that. Really,
it feels a bit of a year of task mastering.
Yeah.
And there is a switch that happens when we move from taskmaster to, I don't know, what would you call it? Visionary, connecting to new ideas, kind of finding myself again so that I know what I want to do next. And task mastering, I don't even know if that's a word, but whatever, is I have a goal, I have a plan, I'm going to follow the steps, and I'm going to get everything done. Very different energy even to the visionary who says, I have this idea of what I want to do, what's coming up or what my future looks like or the kind of person that I want to be. And then you play with that idea and see how I can implement it in creative ways. Doesn't have to be all me doing it as well. So, if you've got room and space to just start thinking in a different way to what this year has been about for you, I think what can come up might be different and also quite wonderful.
Yeah.
So coming from the space of the visionary, actually what's coming up for me is coming up from the space of the visionary, looking at those ideas rather than the taskmaster or the project manager coming into those ideas that, they just need to be implemented.
Yeah. and more, I guess, just giving myself more freedom with those ideas is one of the things that comes up. So one of the ways, the taskmaster, one of the ways that has shown up is with a lot of rules, a lot of like good, carefully thought out, wise rules and structures. But actually, there's quite a lot of them now. Which is part of how I've created this action and these results.
Yeah.
But I wonder if there's like a if there's a, like you said, like there's a different energy way of being through which to approach all those tasks. And I just got a bit of a flash of it then. So one of the things that I found myself talking to a guest on my podcast about another book that I've written. So I have I have another 80,000 words odd written of a book, which is like as long as the 4 books put together almost.
Wow.
Not quite.
Wow.
So like probably,
so that's another 4 books.
Exactly. Probably someone will say to me about that what they said to me about these ones, which were originally going to be 1 book. It's like, that's too long. And I just got this flash when I said it to Jennifer on the podcast that I was interviewing her on. I was like, oh, this probably means this book probably does need to come out. Like it's not, but approaching that with a different energy.
Yeah.
That feels like oh, that's a different thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't have to do it. I don't have to do it because it's the thing through the goal setting mechanisms that I know work really well for me. Makes sense to have on the list.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, that's the transition phase that I was talking about, is that, as I said that before, what got you here won't get you there. It's the thing, how you apply your structures, methodologies, strategies, how you've done it until now might not necessarily serve you or take you to the next level that you want to be in. And how do you open that up a little bit? So what's coming up for me as well is just the example of when, kids learn to ride a bike, or when we were kids and we learned how to ride a bike, we had those fairy wheels on, right, to help us keep it steady. And when you're talking about the rules, I kind of feel like that's the fairy wheels on the bike. Yeah. And then you take those wheels off when you feel more steady, because you can just go without them, and you don't need quite those steadying mechanisms in order to ride the bike, in order to do what you need to do in the world. And at some point you can move on to sport bikes and trail bikes and, all sorts of things like that.
I guess I don't know if it works. I don't know if I can do it in the bike metaphor, but I guess what I became really aware of as you were saying that is like some of the structures that I've put in place. Can I do it in the bike metaphor? I love metaphors. I'm not sure I can. Basically, what came up is some of the structures are my way of protecting myself from like what I think of as one of the hardest things about the modern world, which is like intense communication and distraction.
Yeah, and keeping yourself focused.
Exactly. And so I think what I will need, what came up was I'll need to protect and create, what do we call it? I can't remember what we called it, the ways to practice the space for the new ways of being. So if I don't do that, then honestly, I think this new way of being will just get sucked by LinkedIn requests and people wanting coffees and email into a year of achieving. This feels pretty strong. I can feel that pretty strongly, that is what will happen. Wow. So there has to be the space. So that the space for new ways of being is kind of paramount, because if that is there, let's say that is there in a form of new coaching engagement, a new coach for me, plus some retreats that I organize, plus holiday time.
Exactly.
Then it'll be, at the very least, I won't wake up in a year's time and be like, oh shit, this whole year has gone to nice coffees with interesting people. Exactly.
It's honoring that space, because that space isn't about coffees, and it isn't about, relaxing, and it's about being intentional with visioning I think. I don't know. I know it was my word. I don't know if you have a different word for it.
I love it. I love the idea. Well, I think the first word you said was visionary.
Yeah.
And that's a bit of a hard word for me to hold.
Really?
Like I don't
really
feel like a visionary.
Come on. Are you serious?
It has the feel, Daphne. One of my mentors, Phil, he once said to me, Robbie, you're one of the most creative people I know. And he, like you, like to a certain extent me, had a background in numbers. So I thought, Phil, that's just because you're an accountant. But in the end, I slowed down on it, and I'm like, when the first book was coming out, I kept thinking about that because I was like, who am I to write a book about creativity? I kept thinking about Phil. I was like, Phil said that. It's true. I'm okay to publish this book. So the word visionary is a bit uncomfortable, but feels really good. Like it feels like a stretch for me to be saying, this is the time for that. And I need to create the time and space for it.
Wow. And it really sounds to me like you know how. As you said, you've made a few suggestions there about what that could look like for you.
Yeah.
And holding that space sacred.
Yeah.
Oh, so I feel like we've delved deeply into some things and came up with a completely unexpected result, as tends to happen.
But I think what I love about it, Daphne, I caught this like partway through, is you asked me at some point what, like in the calls, the questions before the call. One of the questions and one of the things I wrote was partly because I was thinking of you, therefore I was thinking of Rich. I wrote like a one-line business plan for 20. I haven't quite got that, but in a way we have got it, right? In some ways.
Yeah, it's true. Tell me.
I can ask myself every time when I'm trying to decide what to do, I can ask myself, well, if this is the year of the visionary, what does the visionary do?
Oh my gosh, I love it. I'm getting goosebumps from that because that is your one-line business plan, if you want to call it that. That is the added dimension that isn't in your structure and your 3 buckets and everything you've done until now.
Yeah.
Time to step into the visionary. And because it scares you.
Yeah. Well, and because I suspect that it will free me.
Mm-hmm.
I suspect that what will happen, here's my guess, is that there are a load of ideas that if I'd done my, let's say I will not do for 2023. If I'd done my goal setting in the way that I normally do, which is a very cool Warren Buffett story, which everyone should look up. If you Google Warren Buffett, James Clear, right, you'll find it.
Yeah.
It's like, do
you want to tell us? Tell us.
Well, essentially, you write down the 25.
Oh, I know the story. Yeah. Go for it. Tell us.
Very quickly, the Warren Buffett story is he gets a private jet pilot. So it's a story we can all identify with. To help him with his career, he gets him to write the 25 things that he wants to achieve in his career. The guy does it, and then he gets him to get it down to 5. And he says, what are you going to do with the 5? He says, and the pilot says, I'm going to work on them right away. And Buffett says, what are you going to do with the other 20? He says, I'm going to squeeze them in as and when. And Buffett says, no, they have to become your avoid at all costs. Because it's the things that we're like really interested in that spread us.
Exactly.
So what I caught was, I think if I stay in that, if the one-line business plan is step into the visionary, it will give me the freedom that I will do some of the things that would have been on that list anyway. But like we've been saying in this conversation, come from a different place.
Yeah.
Come from a place of, I don't really know yet.
So what are you taking away from our conversation today?
Well, quite a lot. But I think that the key thing,
I feel like a bit of a scramble of the brain in some way.
Well, in some ways, but in other ways, not at all, right? In other ways, on the other side of the scramble of the brain is actually quite a lot. Is actually like a different kind of clarity, but a kind of clarity. I think there are kind of 2 main things. There was an action that I caught for myself in the middle of that about speaking to Emma, mainly about money, actually, about is there, if it would make a lot of difference to her if I made £20,000 more money, like an amazing thing, again, thanks to Rich and thanks to everything I've done, is I feel like I could probably do that. If that really, really matters. And it would be useful to know that. So I think there's like in some ways that answers my money questions. Not completely, but partly it does. And then the other piece, of course, is the one-line business plan, is the step into the visionary thing. But then within that, it felt very important to hold the space for that. So like the key thing about that is like, so what would it be? It's like I think a lot because of the creativity work, I now think a lot about what would be just enough, because mostly for other people and for me, one of the things that stops us is trying to do as much as possible. Yeah. Just enough. Yeah. And so the just enough here is like, well, I know at the very least I'm going to need to hold the space for that. And it feels quite exciting to think about 2023. And so going back to that question, here we go. Amazing. Which was such a great question, stumping question early on. One thing that would be exciting for next year is to plan in some parts of that time. Yeah. So to plan in, I think 1 to 2, probably 2 retreats for me in the way that I've done them before, plus 1 holiday. And I think if they were spread throughout the year, and then plus I've already been thinking a bit about what does more coaching for me look like next year? Because it does, that was there as well. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It's a lot of good stuff. A lot of really, really good stuff. Wow. Thank you, Robbie, just for being so open and so willing to share and really going into it and exploring ways of thinking that are totally new and a little bit foreign. Yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks for being here. Thank you for holding that space. Sorry, I'm just writing down those. Yeah, write those things down. Don't lose them. Yeah, thank you for holding the space and particularly for the challenge. I think you very gently and with great good humor pointed out those ways of thinking, which is a little uncomfortable, but because you did it in such a beautiful way, was kind of manageable. And I didn't know, and you gave me that word as well, actually. So thank you for that. Cool. Well, thank you. It's an honor and a privilege, really, to be part of this process. So thanks for allowing it. Yeah, total pleasure. And maybe on just a little bit of a segue, let people know how they can get hold of you, because I think you've got a lot of interesting things we've spoken about that you are putting out into the world. So let's do that a little bit. Yeah, well, to kind of honor this conversation, I feel like if anyone's I'd love to just hear from people who have got things that I wouldn't like to hear that. I was going to say they might help me, but the truth is I don't want to hear that. Yeah. I'd love to hear what I'd love to hear. The coaching stops at the end of the coaching conversation, right? Exactly. I noticed that. I thought that would be true. And as I was saying, I was like, I actually really don't want to hear that. I mostly don't like that. I would like, what would I like? I guess if something in this is connected to somebody, then it'd be lovely to hear from people about that. But you can find all the things that I've talked about, which have been part of this conversation because they're part of the work, the books, the podcasts. I mean, my website is a little, what do you call it? Like ramshackle. Built a long time ago and it's gradually grown, but don't tell everybody that. They don't need to know that. But when I was thinking about I was thinking one of the things that might help me step into the visionary is to really think about myself and to really think about myself might be finally I can, it'll be worth my while. Reading something new, but and thinking about yourself. Sorry, I'm just re-emphasizing that point of thinking about yourself, and that for me is a big part of being the visionary. Is who is Robbie Swale in the next level of his being and creation and leadership and coaching? Yeah, I'm going to write that down. That's great. And but yeah, you can find me at robbieswale.com to answer your question. And we'll put all of those details in the show notes as well. So your books and your social media handles. On the Ramshackle website, the books are there. The podcasts are linked to it. If people dig enough. It's all there. So awesome. And I'll find me on LinkedIn as well. I always just let me know if people want to add me on LinkedIn. I always let me know that you heard me. But I like to connect with people, so that's the case usually.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Robbie. It's been really tremendous. Really, really just a beautiful, enriching conversation for me as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. Same for me.